the Radio Forest Podcast.
Hey, Forrest, this is John Cafiero. How are you?
John Cafiero, welcome. What's going on today, man?
Oh, lots. Always fun stuff happening in the Land of Hatchy Milatchy.
I grew up watching that show. Were you aware of the show, or did you just hear the song and like it?
I heard the song, liked it, thought that it would be a perfect fit for the Sweetie series, and then later, as a result of researching the song, discovered the TV show and found that while the song is very obscure to most of the world, it's not to people who grew up in the Pennsylvania area and loved that staple of the regional community. Seemed like it was an amazing show and reminded me of something I grew up with called the Magic Garden here on the East Coast.
What was the Magic Garden like?
The Magic Garden was this very musical-oriented show with Carol and Paula, who were in a magic garden where they would sing songs, and they had this squirrel puppet that lived in a tree that was always trying to get peanuts, and they would joke around with him. And they had literally this flower bed of daisies called the Chuckle Patch, where the flowers would laugh, and you would pick these little stems off of them that had jokes written on them. And there was a story box that they would open up, and they would tell stories and act them out. I only found out later in life that Carol, who was one of the two hosts, was actually the original Sandy in the Broadway production of Grease.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and if you buy the Broadway soundtrack album, it's Carol Demas from the Magic Garden as Sandy on that original cast album for Grease.
Yeah, I had to do a double take about the song Hatchy Milatchy because it was such a cultural phenomenon in the area, but this is before the internet, so it didn't go viral outside of that small little local TV area. So I was like, wait, it can't be the same one. I'm like, well, it has to be. That's such a unique name. So it's kind of weird. It was like a Mr. Rogers, but on a more of a local scale. They do birthday shout-outs, which now seems silly, but at the time, to have your name announced with your birthday on TV was the biggest thing that could happen.
Oh, absolutely. The Magic Garden did that as well. And I don't know if you're aware, you may be, but the TV show The Office, which takes place in Scranton, Pennsylvania, they actually had an episode where Michael Scott, reminiscing about his childhood, brings in a tape of when he appeared on a show, and they changed the name of the show and they changed the name of the host, but it's the exact same set and circumstances as the Land of Hatchy Milatchy, which obviously is what they were modeling it on.
Yeah, they did a really good job with The Office. That's the area I'm from, the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area. So
cool.
Obviously it's not filmed there, but the opening credits are. But they do such a good job of researching everything from radio station stickers to the mall to going to, I think, was it Chili's that they always go to? It's just very spot on. So whoever did the research for that show did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it's a great show. I've always loved it, and I continue to go back to it. I mean, it's been, I think, 10 years since it's off the air, and every year or so I'll go back and just rewatch the whole series. It's always just been immensely entertaining.
We're talking to John Cafiero, and we're talking about his band Osaka Popstar with the song The Land of Hatchy Milatchy, but that kind of coincides with your comic book, so tell me about, and this is volume 2, right?
Yeah. This comic book is called Sweetie, Candy Vigilante, and it is written and was created by my wife, Suzanne. I produce, art direct, and edit the series. And Sweetie, Candy Vigilante is a honey-dip, dark humor-infused horror fantasy that tells the story of Sweetie, who's an ethereal, beautiful, charming, well-meaning, but unquestionably unhinged supernatural being that also just happens to be the blood relative of the mythological Candyman. And she becomes distraught by the decay of her community and is hell-bent on enacting this blood-caked, sugar-coated manifesto on society, utilizing her otherworldly powers and her family's proprietary secrets in a quest to make the world a sweeter place. And she literally has a Candy Vigilante sweet shop factory discreetly located in the industrial outskirts of Brooklyn, New York, and secretly fights the bad eggs of organized crime with a team of these eccentric supernatural allies that she's assembled who share her passion to make New York City less salty. And she has this arsenal of magical, handcrafted confectionery weapons that can prove lethal to bad people, but delicious and sometimes eternally life-changing to those who are good. We had this series launch coinciding with the Ear Candy album that came out, or the Ear Candy EP, rather, that came out in 2022. The first 6 issues were Volume 1. It was very well received, and there's literally a trade paperback that's available right now of Sweetie Candy Vigilante Volume 1. And now we have launched Volume 2 of the series, with issue number 1, Volume 2 debuting on Valentine's Day, along with The Land of Hatchy Milatchy, which is a single that I recorded specifically for the series, because when I first heard it, I just felt this song is psychotically nice, Sweetie is psychotically nice, and it's just a perfect marriage. And I really just feel that the song is the perfect musical accompaniment to the series and to this issue, because it's the same vibe as the comic book. It's a lot of fun. It's very bizarre. And the approach that I took with this cover version is that since Sweetie sort of sees the world through these candy-coated glasses of sorts, even when she's using her confectionery weapons to grisly fatalities in the name of what's good and fighting the bad, Osaka Popstar's version is imagined as if it's coming from her unhinged but well-meaning point of view. I hope people dig it.
Are you Candy Wolf? Is that kind of, I got a little hint of John Cafiero there.
I am. My wife based Candy Wolf on me, and we both have an extreme love of red licorice.
Yeah.
It's my favorite. But yeah, it's funny. There's a handful of people have picked up on that, you being one of them. But yes, Candy Wolf is loosely based on me.
It seems like a good fit, too, to be on Dynamite Comics, because they have Red Sonja, Vampirella, Elvira, and then like Thundercats. So it seems like a good home for Sweetie Candy Vigilante.
Absolutely. In fact, I had my eye on Dynamite from the very beginning. In fact, when we started developing the series, I told Suzanne, this is a Dynamite book. I definitely think that it would fit in their roster. And then once we had a few issues ready and I felt like we would be able to start releasing without having to worry about deadlines, I spoke with a number of different companies, always still having Dynamite in mind, that I thought that would be the best place. And then after reviewing different options and speaking with Nick Barucci over at Dynamite, it was quickly apparent that they were the perfect home, and we're really happy to have it there, because I've really been a fan of their line of books since inception of the company. I mean, the first thing they ever put out was the Army of Darkness comic book, which was the continuing adventures of Ash from the Evil Dead and Army of Darkness series. And I thought it was a very well done comic book, and have continued to follow them since, buy their stuff even prior to being affiliated with them, and think it's just a great company and a great fit. We have the unique difference of being one of the few original series, because they mainly deal in well-established pre-existing properties that they license. And so we were very flattered that they immediately took to Sweetie and loved it and wanted it so quickly, because, you know, we're one of the very few original properties that they have. And it's been a pleasure to see people react to it and get thrilled that there is this very unique original series to dig into. And it's certainly, in my opinion, one of the most original things out there. There's just nothing else like it.
You did the Dr. Demento Covered in Punk album, and that had Osaka Popstar, Joan Jett, Moon Zappa, Weird Al, the Misfits, Adam West, William Shatner. And I've heard you've got a second one you're working on. Can you give us any names of who's going to be on the next Dr. Demento Punk cover?
I could, and I hope you won't mind, but I won't, simply because I always hate to give away any information about these things until they're ready to go. But I can tell you that if you like the first volume, you will love the second volume. It will not disappoint. We're at least 60, maybe narrowing in on 70% of the way done. I'm planning to continue on and have it finished by the end of the year, in the hopes of having it out in early 2025, maybe mid-2025 at the very latest. But there are definitely going to be some people that were involved in the first one who come back for another track, with a whole cast of new artists, both classic and contemporary punk bands, as well as prolific personalities. And I think that, you know, it's actually even just taking it a step further in the realm of dementia, because being a follow-up and a sequel and a volume 2, I'm taking even more liberties and throwing a few screwier screwballs into the mix than you might expect. But again, it certainly will not disappoint, and it will be just as elaborate, a full 2-hour episode of the Dr. Demento Show, completely produced for this project, never before released. and I think people are going to dig it. I'm so happy with some of the tracks that we've got, but some people that I think you'll even be very surprised to see on there. Sometimes I mention some of the names, and I get eyebrows from the other artists.
I'm going to assume that it's going to be the Misfits, and you don't have to say anything. I just want to ask you, though, with your connection with the Misfits, can you tell me what your involvement is with the band right now, what your duties are, and sort of what they're up to?
Sure. I manage the Misfits. I've been working with the Misfits for well over 20 years now. I first began with them directing their music videos as brought in by Geffen. The Misfits and I had known each other, and we were talking about doing some work together. And then when they were signed to Geffen, Geffen brought my name up as a potential director for their music videos. They immediately said, "Oh, we know John. That would be a great fit." So I started there. Then I became a creative director to the band, started working with them more, eventually became manager, and have been managing them, God, since the early aughts. And it's just been an absolute pleasure. They're, like the Ramones, one of my all-time favorite bands, and I always had my eye on the hopes of getting Jerry Only and Glenn Danzig back together for the original Misfits, and always felt it was possible, although many people thought it wasn't. And literally for, 15 plus years, or 15 years at least, always kept taking steps in the direction of, trying to see that come to be. And by 2016, it happened, and it was never intended to be a long-term thing. It was just looked at it like, well, we'll do a show or two just for the fun of it, and we'll see how it goes. And they have just been absolutely having a blast. They're touring, continuing to do shows. There are several shows coming up this year. There's a big festival called No Values in Pomona coming up in June. There's another festival that's going to be in Columbus, Ohio, that is happening in May. You have a rare opportunity to see the original Misfits. We never know how long it's going to last. It's a day-to-day thing, but they're having the time of their lives because the shows are just amazing. They're at the top of their game. In my opinion, there's no other live band that can even come close to the ferocity and the chops that they've got. And it's just amazing because you're seeing history play out. I mean, this is a band that, unless you were part of a small circle of the first or maybe even just slightly into the second wave of punk in the late 70s and into the 80s, you never got to see the Misfits. And now not only are you getting to see the Misfits and the original Misfits back together, but seeing them with decades of experience under their belt where they've finally tuned their chops and just are literally at the top of their game and musicianship. So you're taking these classic songs, performing them in an impeccable manner with the original people behind them, and then you put Dave Lombardo of Slayer on drums into the mix, because the one position that always changed within the Misfits over the years was the drummer. And it's just a perfect storm. And I take great pride in knowing that I played a part in seeing that come to be, and continue to play a part in keeping it moving forward and keeping them content and happy with what they're doing. And it is such a joy to see, literally they played Madison Square Garden to a sold-out crowd, the first punk band to ever headline Madison Square Garden at all, let alone to a sold-out crowd of fans singing along to every words of songs that eluded the radio but developed a worldwide cult following that is so passionate about it that everywhere they go, the show is just tops the next one. I mean, I'm saying with all sincerity, I'm at every one of the shows, and each one is just better and better than the next. And each person comes out thinking that's the best show I've ever seen. So how they continue to top themselves is just magic.
Well, the comic book Sweetie Candy Vigilante Volume 2 is out. Comes with a song from Osaka Popstar, The Land of Hatchy Milatchy, and we should be getting a Dr. Demento Covered in Punk Volume 2 sometime, hopefully this year. John Cafiero, Osaka Popstar. Great to talk to you today, John.
Thank you, Forrest. Great to speak with you as well. And if your listeners are interested in more, please check out OsakaPopstar.com. It's OSAKA Popstar.com, and you can check out animated music videos that we've done. And if you want to know more about the comic book, check out the art, read the synopsises, or see a trailer for the first volume. It's SweetieCandyVigilante.com. That's SweeTie, CandyVigilante.com. And for Dr. Demento Covered in Punk, hit up DementedPunk.com.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Forrest. Have a great one, and I really appreciate your support.